Okay, everybody, welcome. And I see a few familiar faces on the screen. Hi, Emily. And I'd like to welcome you to the team here at the Flinn Foundation. I'm joined by my two colleagues. I'm Mary O'Reilly. I'm the Vice President of Research here at the Foundation. And I'm joined by my colleague, Nicole Hill, who's one of our program managers, and Olivia Stanley, who is our coordinator for this grants program. This afternoon, I'll do a quick introduction to the Flinn Foundation. If some of you are unfamiliar with us, we are one of the oldest foundations in the state, privately endowed foundation. Our founder was actually a cardiologist, Dr. Flinn, and he had worked at St. Joseph's Hospital. The foundation was founded in the early 60s, but really came into its own in the 80s, and has been funding bioscience research across the state. Since then, we work across the universities and we work across the health systems, funding research from basic research, but also strategic grants to institutions. What we're talking about today is actually our Seed Grants program. I'm just going to share my screen and use a few slides to walk us through the RFP that we're opening up. And then Nicole will field any questions you have in either the chat or as we get to the end, or if people have questions, no problem. Anybody just raise your hand or unmute yourself and ask as we go. Sorry. Let me just do this. Okay, so as I mentioned, the Flinn Foundation, we are actually basing the work that we're doing with this grant on some of the primary goals of the Bioscience Roadmap. And the Bioscience Roadmap has been a guiding document both for the Flinn Foundation, but also across the state of Arizona over the last 20 years, sort of guiding us towards how do we actually make Arizona to be a powerhouse in the biosciences. Obviously, it's not something we have been in the past, but generally the community has a goal of being in the top 10 over the course of the next number of years. So with that, one of the goals, or the second goal of the Bioscience Roadmap, of which there are 5 goals, the second goal is to increase the ability of research performing institutions to turn bench research results into improved disease illness prevention, detection, and treatments. So as I mentioned, we do that through grants directly to the universities and the health systems, but we also do it by supporting our research community and you, as you look to develop new cures, new diagnostics, etc., and translate that research that you're doing in the lab into products, really for the value of patients in the end of the day. And that is really a core, maybe distinguishing feature of this program. We really are looking at projects that are close to the point where you're seriously thinking that this could become a diagnostic, a new therapeutic, etc., that could be commercialized, or, you know, in some cases it might be open source, but we will talk about that as well. So the eligibility for the program, it's open to scientists, clinicians, and others affiliated with the Arizona-based research institutions. So we as an organization are Arizona-focused only, yeah? So you could have partners that are outside the state, but the PI has to be in the state and has to be affiliated with one of our nonprofit organizations. The project must address a clearly defined, compelling clinical need. And that's super important. So this program, this specific program, is not designed for early stage research. It is designed for where you have a prototype already, where you have some data that shows that you're on the right track, etc. So this isn't for early projects, but it is for projects where you really do think that I have enough data, I've sort of tested it out, we're getting close to having something, and we're beginning to think about translating it out. It can also be later. I mean, if you already have your prototypes, you have some validation work done, you're already talking to your tech transfer groups, you know, all of this needs to be in play for this particular grant process. The areas of interest are precision medicine, diagnostics, devices, therapeutics, and healthcare delivery processes. We all are seeing an emergence of health tech, etc. So, this all falls into these categories, and generally somewhat cross-cutting. And we're looking for projects that have clear paths to commercialization. I use the word pre here because obviously everybody on this call is sort of relatively early in that process. However, it has to be you have to have a serious intention of taking this to a point where you can hand it off and commercialize it, you have some good IP, etc. And you do need letters of support from your institutions, because everything you're doing in your institution is actually currently owned by them, or maybe not. But you'll have to talk to them about how you're going to get your IP out of the institution. And also in the process of giving grants to you, there's obviously an overhead that has to be discussed, etc. So the benefits of these projects, though, and we've been running this for a number of years, is that there are 10 projects that will be funded. Each is $100,000 apiece. And this is non-dilutive funding. And actually, Flinn is quite flexible on how that funding is spent. But it has to be obviously geared towards progressing your work. And these grants are for 18 months. There is follow-on funding for the top 2 projects. So at the end of the 18-month period, the teams come together, they present in front of a review panel, and that panel selects the 2 that they feel have made the most progress and gives them an additional $100,000 for a follow-on for 12 months. Part of the program, again, this isn't just Flinn giving grants and hoping for the best. People do actually come together every quarter, they report out on progress, and we try to bring in industry advisors and researchers who really have done this before, or who might belong to the FDA, they could have manufacturing backgrounds, etc., to really help provide some additional advice and support to this group, so that, again, we can accelerate the progress that is being made. And you're also members. This also allows you to become a member of the Bioscience Roadmap Steering Committee and the Arizona Bioscience Industry Association for the course of the grant period. Opportunities to be building networks. So the funds can be used for program-related lab expenses. Again, there's a lot of flexibility in how the funds are used. They can't be used as compensation for the principal investigators. They can be used to support lab staff doing tests, etc. You can have subcontracts with others who are doing important work for you. All of this would have to be laid out, and obviously everything that's done is in relation to the project. We have agreements with the institutions that the indirect is up to a maximum of 10%. This is published on our website in general for all our grants. That's important to note, because that's an important piece for some of our institutions. It just indicates that this is a standard practice and not something special for this particular program. So the expectations for the program are that when somebody says that we're at point B and we want to get to point C, that actually is what happens over the course of the 18 months. There's really a strong intention of making progress on this particular project. Now, we will say that we are very sort of familiar with the fact that most of you will have multiple projects running. Getting in your R01s is a really big deal and takes up a lot of your time. But this opportunity with this funding is somewhat allows you to do something a little bit different. It allows you to take something that you mightn't have funding for currently, to really get the data that you need to really take a very strong step forward on the translational path. So while not huge, this can be important funding. And I think a lot of people who've gotten the funding in the past will attest to that. It's important to have your IRB approval in place, or at least, if not in place, to have it progressing at a really good level, so that there's no issue that if you were to win a grant, that suddenly you don't have IRB approval and therefore you can't start your project for a good 6 months after the award date. Obviously, as I mentioned, people come together every 6 months, or sorry, every 3 months. People report out. There's presentations at those meetings. And we really try, everybody really tries to stay on track. And the nice thing about that is, because we bring together mixtures of scientists with clinicians, with others, it's a really fertile opportunity to bat around ideas, to get advice, etc. So there can be real benefit to working with this sort of cross-disciplinary team, even those who are working at different stages or in different areas. And I do see a question there from a person asking about the presentation. Absolutely, the slides will be available to everybody on this after the call, in addition to which we'll actually upload it onto our website. And again, if anybody has any specific questions or wants any follow-up, we're here to be as helpful as we can in getting you that information. So here are examples of some recently funded projects, just as an indication of types of programs that we're seeing. However, I would also refer you to our website, because every project that we have funded over the last number of years is listed on our website. But for example, HistoHeal is a project being run by Dr. Yaron at ASU, and it's the development of a bioactive dressing for diabetic wounds. Again, another one is the pain management system that's being developed by Dr. Streaker at the University of Arizona College of Medicine. We have septic shock, a diagnostic by Dr. LaBelle at Grand Canyon University. We have a biomanufacturing project looking at the encapsulation of cell products, again at ASU. And we have diagnostics, therapeutics, and the whole gamut. So anything that you do falls within these areas. And again, I said, it has to be something that has a real clinical need. I suppose that is the other one. And I just missed a question there, but we'll come back to it. With regard to the application, I think you probably all have access to the application portal. So it's just a matter of setting up your account. And it's a SurveyMonkey portal that we're using, which is really super easy to navigate. Once you get in, the benefit is you aren't the only, you can actually assign collaborators. So a few of you can be working on the proposal as you go. Now, I will say that one of the things that we have tried to do is to make the application process as sort of easy as possible. We have it done, it's organized so that it's not actually a full proposal. We're looking for a slide deck. So 15 slides to talk about your project. And we'll actually run through what those slides, what each of those slides requires, so that you have a clear idea by the end of this. Then the basic application, as I mentioned, is we're just looking for some basic contact information. That's broken out by the PI, but also the person submitting. So obviously somebody from your lab may be submitting for you, but we look for you as a PI. We look for your information, obviously, because you're going to be our key point of contact, etc. The project lay, we have a project lay summary, 300 words. This is really important to think about this, to be as clear in this and concise as you can. And remember that a lay summary is for people who may not be expert in areas. So it needs to be clear and compelling. So it's only 300 words, but this can be a really great sort of soundbite of the project that you're going to be presenting. The application deck, it's 15 slides. And as I mentioned previously, you need a letter of support from the university. There's a template online, and that can be uploaded and you get assigned. So the slide deck, actually, maybe I can click on this. And again, there's a template for this, but there is just 15 slides. And when I say the template, you don't actually have to use the slides as with the background that we're here. But the title, the actual title of each of these slides is important because that's the content you need to present. So we have a title slide. The really first important one is clinical need and the scale of the problem. So if we're talking about, solving an issue for diabetes, the scale of the problem, and really the key point coming on the next slide is, why is your solution better than, say, current standard of care? So that's really important. What makes your approach special? And that's here. And then the development work, there are 2 slides. So again, all of you are working on very complex projects. Trying to distill that down into 2 slides is somewhat difficult. But again, concise pictures sometimes are better than words. Again, though, the data that you present needs to be sort of really give highlights of the quality of information that you are you're generating. All of these projects will be reviewed by people who have deep scientific experience, so they may not be expert in your area, but they're definitely good scientists. So just keep that in mind. The validation work done to date, as we mentioned earlier, this is not for basic research where you're just getting your very first sets of data. This is where you have some significant data, mention the publications. And because this is a project where you're thinking about commercializing, if you have done, let's say, the NIH I-Core program or others, customer feedback, if you're developing a medical device, have you talked to a medical practitioner who might use it? What do they think of your idea? What do they think of your solution, etc.? So, building that in, again, it's only one slide, so you have to be very careful of how you present your data and be as just impactful as possible. Your pre-commercialization plan, again, everybody on this call may not be thinking of developing a product that will make money eventually. And while, Flinn is not particularly interested in sort of the ROI, we are super interested in the number of people impacted by the work that you're doing. So even if you say that we have a product we're developing as part of our component, we'll have some open source our software, for instance, that open source doesn't mean that it's there for anybody to use. A question that would be asked by a review panel is, well, how do you expect to get people to use it? How many people would you expect to use it over the course of a year? What's your adoption plan? And then, even an open source product has to be maintained. So how would you plan to generate the funding to keep that going? So open source isn't just sort of, and I won't say a lazy person's way of just saying, oh, we want it out there and we'll just see what happens. It really needs a very specific plan of action to ensure you get the levels of adoption and execute on the value that you think is there for your product versus something else. However, more often other products, if it's a medical device, let's say if it's a variation on, the newest pacemaker, obviously the number of products that go to market, how you're going to do that, etc., is something that you should be thinking about. Nobody's saying that you have to have a deep plan at this stage. It's still early, I presume, but you need to be just cognizant of what it will take to get there. Regulatory requirements, all of the products you're developing will require some regulatory pathway. Have you thought about it? How's it influencing what you're doing? And what's your plan to address that? Again, this is over time. So it's not what you might need to do tomorrow, but what are you thinking of, 2 years down the line or 3 years down the line, and give some sense that you are building that into the work that you're doing today. Your project plan for the grant period, this is 18 months. Where are you starting? What's your starting point? And what you planned to get done over the grant period so that it feeds into your longer term plan. Intellectual property strategy. Again, this has to be thought about a little bit more than just saying, I'm going to talk to my tech transfer office. You need to sort of have an idea of what intellectual property you have or will have, and how are you going to, what's involved in those discussions with your tech transfer group? What's the value of the IP that you have, etc., and how are you going to utilize it over time? Like at a later stage, when an investor would be looking at a program or at a company, the IP that they have is really the most compelling feature of value for your product. So IP is a very important component of your overall strategy. The funding you've received to date, most people will have a number of grants that they've been using to develop their work to this point in time. So list out all of that as it gives an indication of how much work is done and the value that it has based on other people's assessment. The project team and your resources. So again, these projects, most of them will require you having a multidisciplinary team to get you. And again, it's what is the team that you need to help you get to the point that you're talking to in this project. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to have a great business person as part of your team today. You certainly need access to somebody with a business background to help craft this overall vision of where you're taking your program. But, you know, it might be more important to have clinicians as part of your team so that they are validating your ideas for you as you come up with new, say, diagnostic tools. For instance, actually having a scientist, clinicians, and engineering, you know, as three components of your team is really always seen as a very positive in the areas that we're looking at. The grant budget, you know, what's the plan? We're using the grant funds over the grant period. And again, note that many people, we often get applications where they haven't really talked to their institution or considered the fact that most institutions will require them, you know, be sort of mandatory that 10% of their funds are allocated as indirect. So just know that up front and include it in your budget and your planning. So what else will reviewers what else should you know about the reviewers of your project? So we as an organization, you know, Nicole, Olivia, or I are not involved directly in the reviews. How we set it up is that most of the applications, or all of the applications when they come in, will be sort of assigned into, depending on the numbers, we'll sort of get teams of 3 reviewers to look at maybe 12 proposals. So we sort of split it out. We generally get about 80 or so applications. So again, the opportunity, 80 applications, 10 winners. So your opportunity for winning is quite high. It's certainly not like the NIH, but you know, the money is a little less. However, we do really take the review process super seriously. We ensure that if we are putting teams of 3 together to review every application, that we have science, you know, good scientists on each of the review panels. We generally have somebody from a clinical setting on a review panel, etc. So that we really try to get make sure that we're doing a really good job for you. And then we provide feedback. Even if the project doesn't progress, we will provide feedback to everybody on their application. And we hope that that is useful in refining your programs as you go forward. I had a note from one of our previous applicants who didn't win an award the other day, and he just mentioned that, you know, I didn't win an award, but I was able to take feedback that I got, revise what we were doing, and then resubmit to the DoD and won a DoD grant. So I think there's always the benefit of getting good reviewer feedback and using it to improve projects going forward. Yeah. I think I have lost the ability to move my slides. Just give me a sec here, guys. Okay. So then just looking, we've gone through the presentation deck, and again, we will give you this slide. This was just a summary. When you're saving,
Mary,
again, yeah, yes.
Will you share your screen again?
Oh, yeah, my apologies.
Perfect, thank you.
Is that okay?
Kind of zoomed in now for me. I'm not sure about that's perfect.
Okay, great. So we talked about the review panel that we use. We obviously have a scoring matrix, and this is here at the back, but we will share it. It'll also be available on our website. And the general notification, we have 2 phases of review. So all applications go through obviously round 1, and then we distill down. Now, what we haven't done prior is notifying people who don't get through to phase 2. This year, I think we might do that, and we'll get you feedback out as soon as we can, just so that you're not waiting around to hear But in general, those who do win awards will be notified by mid-December with starting dates in early January. This is the rubric. Again, the rubric is based on the slides and the order of the slides. So it's important. We said 15 slides. Clinical need is early on, development of research and validation, etc. So following the order in which slides are requested is super important, because you don't want to cause the reviewers any levels of irritation, as you know, so that they take their time and review your applications properly. So some of the lessons learned for us in having done this a few times is that, a lot of times the compelling clinical need is not clearly stated, and neither is the reason why your product or your approach is better than the current approach. So that's really important. If you think this is what you're doing is really good, well, you really need to tell us why it's good compared to the current standard of care. Poorly discussed path towards market. If this is not something that you're really, you feel competent in at this point in time, I suggest that you talk to your tech transfer groups. We have found across all of the institutions, the tech transfer groups are super helpful in guiding how to even write these and just think about them. So do that. The other suggestion I'd have is, if you are really interested, that the ICOR is running local project or local programs, that I think there's probably openings now. It's easier to get in. These are run locally. So I would suggest, if anybody is really interested in doing this over time, that they should do the ICOR program as well. The ICOR program is particularly good for thinking through your idea and thinking through who the market is and who your customers eventually are. A poorly discussed IP strategy. We've seen things like, I will talk to my tech transfer group on a slide. That's the only sentence. So that really doesn't show a high level of sort of thought around how you're actually going to tackle what is generally a complicated step. Again, too much text and technical information, so that not clearly projecting your message. So again, you have 15 slides. It sounds little when you're used to writing full papers, but again, just be really judicious about the information that you provide. As crisp and clear and pointed as possible will work to your advantage. Team composition is another area. We'll have one researcher or two applying, saying that they want to take the product to market. There's a high level of complexity in doing that, as we know that, and we are beginning to see a lot more well-blended teams, so that have business, engineering, the science, and clinical aspects to their team. And that's all really important, because if you have a clinician with you or somebody with a medical background, they're validating your product for you. So they're going to help you stay on track. And that would be seen as being just a really efficient way for you to make progress quickly. And then, as I mentioned at the beginning, if you're asked for a summary in lay person's terms, that's really what you should give, but not something too complicated, as this is used then to sort of send out to people initially, just to give them a sense of what projects they're going to be reviewing. But also, if when somebody wins, pardon me, I'm gone purple. When somebody wins, then I'll leave it there for a second. But when somebody wins, the this is what we would use for public publishing winners, etc. And send any questions that you have to myself. Nicole will share her email also, and we're just a phone call away. So we're here to be as helpful as we can to you. And I'm going to stop just there so I can stop myself being purple.
Oh, we did get some questions. So
Okay.
The first one is, can you go into more detail about what qualifies as a research institution for the program?
Yeah, so we're normally talking about the 3 universities. We do work with Barrow Neurological Institute, if there's research going on in your health system, then that would be considered a research. So the person who asked, do they want to unmute themselves and maybe ask me about their specific institution?
Lucy?
Hi there. So I asked a question. So I'm just asking for like an interested faculty member, Dr. Mackin, he's in the call right now. But so we're at AT Still University. We're a small private health sciences institution. So our focus is education, but we also have research active faculty members and research infrastructure to support that. So my question is like, would we be eligible to like put in an application to this program?
Yes. So what I'd say is this program is open to 501c3 organizations. So if a group were to say, well, we're not private, but we have a foundation, as part of an organization, then they generally would submit through their foundation. Yeah. But so I don't know what AT Still is.
May I speak, Lucy,
Sure.
on your behalf? Yeah, so
Sure.
I'm Dr. Markin. We have a very functional research program on our campus in Mesa. We are a DO program and a dental program.
Sure.
We have Lucy is one of the directors of the pre-awards program. We have a fully populated research and grants office that writes grants with us, R01s and others, R21s. And as far as I'm concerned, I do research most of my time, and we have at least 3 labs that I'm working in on campus right now, on our campus in Mesa. So, I mean, research is as it's supposed to be,
Yeah. And Dr. Michael, I know, I think you met with Nicole yesterday, but absolutely. So the work you're doing, obviously, Flinn is interested in research. It's as you think through an application, though, the eligibility is a 501c3 organization. So the question would be, is AT Still a 501c3?
Yes.
Yes, it is. Well, then you're eligible. And I would say if there's anybody on the call that where their organization isn't a 501c3, if they have a 501c3 embedded in their institution, as let's say there's a private hospital, but they have a foundation.
Yeah.
That is generally how they would apply.
No, I mean, we are clearly a not-for-profit university, a 501c3. We, for all taxable purposes, in fact, we have to provide the documentation for all purchases we make and so on and so forth.
Perfect. Well, then,
thank you.
This project, this is
very good.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. O'Reilly.
Thank you, Lucy.
Okay. Any additional questions?
We have another one. Is there a limit to the number of proposals per organization allowed?
No, per organization, not. And actually, even per PI, we've never written in that, a PI can't send in more than one. Although I just think it's so much work, they probably wouldn't. But no, we are, every project comes in and is actually independently reviewed, so it doesn't matter. And actually, if you look at who has won these awards over the last number of years, you like to see, a number going to U of A, a number going to ASU, and a number going to NAU and the other institutions. And really, what we're interested in is finding really good projects and good science and being supportive of them, somewhat independent of their institution.
The next question we have is, are the 10% indirect costs over the 100K grant amount? And actually, I think I answered that wrong in the chat. It's part of the 100K grant amount, right? So 90,000 for directs and 10,000 for indirects.
And that's correct. Yeah.
The next one we have is, should the verbiage on the slides be in layman's terms?
Well, I would say if people consider, it depends. If people, the people who are reviewing are not going to be completely, lay people. You might have a clinician, you'll have somebody with a good science background. So I would say from a slides perspective, you know, you have people who are knowledgeable, but they may not be specifically knowledgeable on your precise science. So if you're talking about, you know, some specific say protein interactions, etc., you might try to be clear on those, because somebody reviewing it might be necessarily knowledgeable about that particular action. But so I think it's you know, you're presenting to professionals at that level. Yeah, so I would say you don't have to be too basic there, but again, you're telling a story, and it's you know, you're trying to create a compelling discussion. So I would say you're talking to professionals. This can be, you know, pitched at that level, but cut back a little bit on maybe the technicality or the amount of technical data that you give, so that it doesn't overburden the slides that you're presenting, which is what we often see. You know, we'll see 3 slides that have 1 to 10, and it's all technical, whereas they should really be talking more broadly about their project. Does that answer the question?
I think it does. Robert, is there anything else you'd like to know on that one?
No, that answered the questions. Just sometimes when you're describing specific pathways, it gets tempting to actually name what the pathways are. And so it's kind of a nuance. I've been learning more about this, and I was advised to kind of keep the font around 18 or 20 on the slides. I don't know what your feedback on that is, but I know 10 is too small.
Yeah, 10, yeah, you know, and I really can't give you an answer about whether it should be like 14 or 18. It's like, in the end of the day, you're doing a nice presentation for a group of professional people and you want to make an impact. So I think it really goes to what do you think?
But they're gonna be reviewing it on a computer screen.
Yes, they're going to be reviewing it on a computer screen.
Okay. All righty. Thank you.
Okay.
We do have a couple more questions in the chat, but Rachel has her hand up. Rachel?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Rachel Gray. I'm at ASU in the nursing school. I'm not a nurse. I'm a PhD researcher. And so we got this call circulated around to us, but I just wanted to clarify that the kind of research I do is relevant to the call. So it sounds like a very basic science oriented clinical translational kind of projects. I do public health and health systems work, so we have existing research on implementation science of genomic medicine in clinics in Arizona. Bits are obviously more social sciencey. So I'm just wondering if that's relevant for this call.
Yeah, so I think, Rachel, I think that's sort of an interesting question. Okay, and what I would say is, when we have gotten proposals in the past that were maybe more, say, public health related, one, you know, somebody was saying, oh, we're going to develop a new protocol for X, Y, or Z. Yeah. So, but the question that would get asked is, that's great, but how are you going to make sure people use it? Yeah. How are you going to make sure that your protocol becomes standard of care? And I truly believe that if you can answer that well, I think you're as competitive as anybody else, because you're going to impact, you know, if you're saying that we're going to have an impact on a very specific population, and we're going to make sure that that occurs, and we have a plan for doing that, which generally means that you have to find a way to fund that. Yeah. So I would say that in itself is an interesting challenge for you. Yeah. But if you think this is important, then you want people to use it. And if you can show that, I think that could be super interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's reassuring.
Okay.
The next question we have is, are preclinical experiments that involve repurposing FDA-approved drugs considered?
Yeah, so again, I would say, in my view, yes, if but it depends on everything else that comes around that. Yeah, so again, and I believe we did get an email from the person who has asked that question, and I apologize for not responding in writing. But again, I would say it's all about what you're going to do with that. So if you prove that that is the case, you know, how are you going to make sure people know about it, and how are you going to make sure people adopt it? So again, all really good work. In the end of the day, it's all about adoption. So if you can answer those questions, I think you have a compelling case.
And next one we have is for IP strategy. For those of us within universities, is it advised to reach out to tech launch or equivalent prior?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You should definitely have talked to your tech launch people before. Tech launch, we have done a lot of work with tech launch, and I don't know if Bruce Burgess or any of the team are online, say at U of A or any of the team from ASU or SkySung or others. You know, highly advise you to go and talk to them early. They can even provide you with early guidance on how to craft your vision for the program that you're doing, because that'll come through in your slides, and therefore it's important to have thought through that. And I would say talk to them. And Bruce, you're there.
Yes, yeah, more than happy to talk with you. Just simply reach out to us and we'll get in touch with you.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Bruce.
The next one, is there an example of an effective slide deck?
Okay, so we can certainly share some slide decks or a slide deck with you. We put one together, but we can certainly share an effective slide deck, but it sort of differs. And actually, I would say, and maybe Bruce, I would say if you're working with your tech transfer groups, they are probably a better guide to how to do this well than us giving you a generic, I mean, I could show you slide decks of people who won last year, but because it's sort of specific to their projects, it might necessarily translate too well for you. So we can definitely share with you what they are. And then if you ever have any questions on your slide deck, you can always reach out to us. Actually, Nicole and I are not, as I said, are not part of the review process, and we're sort of happy to at least, have a look at somebody's slide deck and give them a few pointers before they submit. But you do need to send it to us about 2 weeks before the end date, and not, the day before, because we wouldn't be able to give you that feedback in that time.
Okay, we have one more question from the chat and then someone with their hand up. So if you are a startup company currently not connected to a research institution, would this be an ineligible situation for application?
Yeah, so that's sort of interesting. So this is designed for researchers at universities or in health systems. In saying that, we have had applications and successful applications of very early startup companies working with researchers, and they have a collaboration. So the bulk of the work is actually still going on in the university. So my suggestion there would be that you have a research partner. It's the only way you can apply, but you'd have to have a research partner at the university. That for companies can bring a little level of complexity, because now you're talking about shared IP. So early start companies who don't have that relationship, this unfortunately just is not the program that is for you.
And we have Abhi with his hand raised.
Hi, Abby.
Hello, man, how are you doing?
Good.
So okay, I have a quick. I've actually tried the opposite question, in fact. So the last question was very relevant. So thanks to all the suggestions from last year, we went into I4, qualified for the nationals, and now then we are actually working with an industry,
Okay.
and with ASU, of course. Now, is that eligible?
Yeah, I mean, so I would say if you're the PI, if the IP that you're generating is yours to translate out and share with that company, yeah, absolutely. That's hugely valuable. Yeah. So if you already have a partner who's interested in the work you're doing and bringing it forward, then that's a great thing.
And that's where a next small question comes in. Often the science research that we do in the lab is a little, now have grown to understand that is a little bit different from the kind of research that happens at the interface of industry. Like it's not necessarily the same, fundamental or potentially interesting research or potentially translatable research. So it's a little, in a way, when there's a certain kind of research associated with translating your work to a product where the core research is already done and that translational part is its own research in a way. And is that still considered scientific research in Flinn's dictionary?
Okay, actually, I think I'd have to look at, actually, I don't have a good answer for you. So I think maybe you could send me something offline and I could take a look at it, because I don't know how to answer. I don't know how to answer that one, but happy to take a look and to figure out. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
That's all of the questions from the chat. Are there any others from the audience?
Hey, Peter. Peter, we can't hear you.
Does this work?
Yes.
Okay. And maybe go beyond the scope of the call and maybe to be just go offline. I have a researcher coming with a pharmacogenomic project. And he has already analyzed a lot of questions. He is thinking about and working on rolling out it into the healthcare system. Would it be the translation that the Flinn Foundation would support through this process, or something else?
Yeah, so I want to say, like in the pharmacogenomics area, let's say if they're coming up with a new diagnostic tool, yeah, where they could, test X number of, maybe different medications against, some indication, or, that they could sell then to SnoreQuest or something, something like that, to me sounds, yes, it fits in. But so it depends what he's using. It depends what his plan is. Yeah. Peter, and have you, like, what is the plan? Is it just research oriented, or is it something else?
No, it is actually going in the translation. I think he has, from what I have seen, he has done the basic research. It's really now rolling it out into the clinical validation and then into the healthcare system. And he already has contacts into the healthcare systems. Yeah,
okay. So that sounds like if he's talking about like getting something out and people are actually going to use it, and he can sort of build up adoption over time, well then that does sound like something that might fit.
Okay.
Here. Yep. Okay. Perfect. Any additional questions?
None in the chat.
No. Okay. Okay, guys. Again, we're here to be supportive, so just send us your questions. And if we don't answer the questions, call, but we will try to get back to you as soon as we can. And as I said, also, when people are applying, talk to people like Bruce and Peter, who are down at the U of A. If there are people online from SkySong or from ASU and NAU, similarly, or across the institutions, you talk to your tech transfer people. They're super helpful in sort of guiding you on how to put this type of application together if you haven't done it before. And as we get in applications, I think a real value to sending in an application is we will have it reviewed. It will be reviewed by 3 reviewers, and we will provide feedback to everybody who applies. And we see that as a really important component of this. So while there's only 10 awards, I think as a community, we can learn a lot from this process. And our sort of guiding principle is we want to get as many of you and your research out of the lab and into the hands of patients as we can. Okay? Okay. Well, thank you all very much, and we'll talk to you soon. This will all be online, but we will also shoot out the slides to everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary.
Thank you.
Bye. Take care, guys.